Looking back, Aneesha, what were your first few symptoms that cropped up?
I used to have heavy periods, which at the time I thought was normal. I had a lot of pain.
Did you never think that, okay, my friends are not complaining, or they are not maybe experiencing some of these symptoms that I am, or maybe some other people in my family are not?
So in our heads at that age, well, for me it was pain is pain, so you're uncomfortable. And I remember sometimes I would be walking and I wouldn't be able to move because the pain would be that bad. And if I moved in a certain position, it was just, honestly, it was awful.
Then what made you think this is not normal?
And knowing what I did as a man at that point, obviously I couldn't relate to it, but I knew from what I saw, there was just something inside that went, this isn't cramped.
So then what happens? Ben is constantly telling you this is not something right.
Lots of women that have endometriosis that find it difficult to conceive.
And I'm assuming that doctors knew about endometriosis. Do you feel let down by the health services?
I had the MRI scan, and what that showed was that I had...
Welcome to Unbroken, my story with Tisha. Today we're going to talk to a lovely couple, Aneesha and Ben, and we're going to talk about a topic that is very rarely spoken about openly: endometriosis. We're going to talk about what it's meant for them, how it's impacted them, and how they're living with endometriosis on a daily basis. Let's get into it. Aneesha, Ben, thank you so much for being here today and wanting to share your story with all of us. Would you like to start by introducing yourself?
So I am Aneesha, and I am here today to share my journey so far through having endometriosis.
Thank you. And Ben?
Thank you. I'm Ben, Anisha's husband, here to share my experience of Anisha's journey through endometriosis. Nice to meet you.
Likewise. So looking back, Aneesha, what were your first few symptoms that cropped up, and what did you make of those symptoms?
Yeah, so I was quite young. I think it was probably about 14, 15. I used to have quite heavy periods, which at the time I thought was normal. I had a lot of pain, which again I thought was normal. You know, women often spoke about, taking paracetamol or having pain, which I used to take, but I also had a number of other pains. But I just carried on thinking that, as I said, I know I've used the word normal, but that's what it was. I normalised it because it wasn't something I really spoke about. And if I ever did mention that I was uncomfortable or in pain, it was always just, yes, when girls have periods, it can be painful. And so that's how it was.
Did you never think that, okay, my friends are not complaining, or they are not maybe experiencing some of these symptoms that I am, or maybe some other people in my family are not, and then this is weird, this is different, this is not right?
So I remember girls of my age at the time, friends of mine, they would always say, oh, my tummy's hurting a little bit, or I'm going to put a hot water bottle on, or I'm going to take some paracetamol. So in my head, they were also in pain because we never spoke about, I guess, the amount of pain, or what that pain equated to, for example. So in our heads at that age, and well, for me, it was pain is pain, so you're uncomfortable. I also remember a time, and I was only speaking to Ben about it actually, interestingly, that I remember being at a family party. So it was at my mum's house, and we were having a party, and all the family was there. And I remember I was starting to have pain, and I always used to get this pain in my lower back and my buttock area. And I remember saying that, I was like, oh, it's really painful, to my mum. And my Massey was there at the time as well. And I remember my mum saying, oh, I have that, it's, all of us have had that. It's just normal. It's something that we have. Yeah. And so when I heard that, I was like, oh, okay, so it's normal. So I never questioned it at the time. To me, it was just maybe a hereditary thing, and so I left it.
Okay. And then what happened? So when did you start to think, okay, this is not right and I need to go to the GP maybe, or did you try some other remedies to feel better?
I think for a number of years I just carried on like normal. I just used to take paracetamol, and it was painful, but it was almost manageable when I took, like I said, paracetamol, ibuprofen. I could take it. I would always have to constantly be taking it during my period, but I was able to manage it. And then I remember as I got a bit older and I went to university, the pain became a little bit more. And I remember sometimes I would be walking and I wouldn't be able to move because the pain would be that bad. And if I moved in a certain position, it was just, honestly, it was awful. But again, I had just convinced myself that this was part and parcel of being, you know, a woman, and this is the pain you got. And then me and Ben got together, and I remember I used to struggle with periods, and I remember, you know, Ben questioning, he was like, is this normal? He was like, for you to be in this much pain? And I remember saying, I don't know if you remember, like, yes, this is normal. I was like, what would you know? I was like, you're a man, you're not going to know what pain is like. I was like, this is just something we go through. And even you questioned it quite a few times, but I just was like, you know, like I said, I was almost a bit blasé about it and was like, well, what would you know?
And what made you think this is not normal? What did you see that made you think this is not right?
I think people obviously have very different pain thresholds, and pain affects people in different ways. But for me, and knowing Aneesha as much as I knew her then, you can tell when someone's really struggling. And this wasn't just, I've got a headache, I'm struggling a little bit, I'll just sit down and take 5 minutes. This was seeing someone take medication, albeit over-the-counter medication, but not being able to move, being sat on a sofa, you know, curled up or laying on a bed, and every kind of small movement resulting in loads of pain. So although I didn't have an in-depth knowledge, I didn't even know what endometriosis was at that point, to be honest. And knowing what I did as a man at that point, obviously I couldn't relate to it, but I knew from what I saw, there was just something inside that went, it's not just this isn't cramp. It's not cramp. You know, I relate to cramp, and it's a different kind of cramp, like a muscular cramp through sport. It's really uncomfortable for a while, but you stretch it and it goes and you carry on. But even back then, when I think about it now, this pain was debilitating enough for Aneesha to not be able to do what she wanted to do at that time when the pain was there. And even then, there was like a hangover, a layover of the pain. It wasn't just like, oh right, that's past now, let's go and get on with the rest of our day. It could take a whole afternoon or an evening out of your life, essentially. And so I just thought it wasn't sitting right with me. And I probably pushed you a lot to go. But again, what Aneesha said about having that reinforcement through her childhood about it's a woman thing, we have to go through this. You know, Mom's had heavy periods, Massie's had heavy periods, go even further and further back. I think maybe you just lull yourself into a full sense of security, thinking, just got to get on with it.
Yeah. So then what happens? So Ben is constantly telling you this is not something right, and maybe he pushed you to go and see the GP. What happened next?
I went to the GP and I spoke about the difficulties I was having. And I remember at the time the GP said, well, you know, this can happen. You can have difficult periods. Your body's changing as you get older. And the one thing I did get told was, being Asian, a lot of Asian women suffer from more difficult periods. So I was told this. And at the time, once again, you know, in my head, I think I did think, really? But then the other part of my brain went to, well, you're the expert, you're the doctor, so therefore you must be telling me the truth. And so that's what I believed, and I left. And I now realise there was probably a lot of things where I wasn't quite ticking the box. So we're very fortunate to be able to conceive our 2 children. One thing I will say is there's lots of women that have endometriosis that find it difficult to conceive. So I was very fortunate that I was able to conceive 2 children. The pain actually got worse after I conceived. Now, sometimes pain can get better once you conceive. Every woman's body is different. So I went back again, saying that the pain was worse. This time it was, oh, your body's probably changed because you've had children. That's probably why your periods are getting worse. Okay. And I was consistently going back, and I was just being told, you know, your body's changing, or okay, let's give you an extra strong painkiller instead because that might be helpful for you. But even with painkillers, that also impacts you and your way of life, because it can make you drowsy. There's all sorts of, you know, side effects. And so I carried on, and then I remember I was out on a trip to Bridge North with my Massie. I did have family come from India, and I had both the children, they're only little, and we'd gone out for the day. And I remember we were sitting down to eat, and I had the biggest wave of pain throughout my whole body. I nearly passed out at the table, it was that bad. And I remember just saying, I just need to use the bathroom. And I remember I couldn't even see the door to walk to the bathroom, it was that bad. And I still remember it to the day. It's so clear I remember what happened. I went into the bathroom and I couldn't figure out what was happening to me. I was like, what is it? Is it, like I said, it was time of the month. Is it the type of sanitary wear that I'm wearing? Is that having an impact? Because I know sometimes if you wear certain types of sanitary wear, if you keep it in too long, that can have an impact. So I was like, is it that? Have I had it in for too long? So, I was trying to sort myself out. And then I thought, am I going to be sick? I could not figure out what my body needed. I calmed down a little bit. I left the bathroom and I remember going back to my masseur. I was like, I feel really, really bad. I need to just go to the car. I was like, I feel really sick. Can you keep the children and just give me a minute and I'll meet you back at the car? So I remember she was like, of course. And she was great, my masseur, where she was like, yep, no problem. I walked back to the car. On my way to the car, I started throwing up. I remember I was just being sick all the way to the car. I eventually just about managed to get to the car. I thought I was going to pass out. I remember just like putting the seat down and just lying there cradling myself, because I thought it was the worst feeling I've ever felt at the time. And like I said, I didn't know what I needed. I didn't know if I wanted to faint. I didn't know if I wanted to be sick. I didn't know if I needed to sleep. I just couldn't figure out. It's like my body was going into overdrive. Eventually that feeling started to wear off, but the pain was still there, and then it started to concentrate all in my, like where my stomach area is, my womb area is. I managed to drive back home, and by then the pain had eventually, must have been about 6 hours later, it started to wear off slowly. And then that's when I'd said to Ben that there is something wrong. I was like, that wasn't right, what happened. Went back to the GP again, I explained what had happened. They were like, yeah, that doesn't sound right. Let's look at other medication. Were you worried about anything? And they're asking me all these questions. I was like, no. Sent me away, nothing. And then COVID happened, didn't it? So by the time I got to COVID, I would have been about 30 at that point. So it'd taken this many years so far. So it started at 13, 14. I'm now 30 at this point. And I remember I started getting more and more ill. And then there was a week I couldn't get out of bed. Do you remember?
It was a full week.
Couldn't physically stand up from the pain. As soon as I stood up, I just had to, I was hunched back over in pain. I could not physically get out of bed. The pain was that bad.
For the whole week?
For the whole week. I just couldn't get out of bed. The pain was, honestly, it was debilitating, the pain was. And I remember I rang the GP, because at that point we couldn't go into the GP. And I remember I eventually got an appointment, and I just got through to the doctor. And as soon as he asked me how he could help, I just cried down the phone. And I was like, I'm begging, I used the words, I'm begging you have to do something to help me. I was like, something's not right. I described everything, and I remember he said to me, something's not right from what you've told me. He said, let me see what I can do. And he was the first doctor that even just that acknowledged and said, something's not right. And so he referred me then for a scan.
Endometriosis has always been there, and I'm assuming that doctors knew about endometriosis. Do you feel let down by the health services?
I mean, there's so many documentaries out now, and it's really good because there's more and more information, more knowledge being shared, and so many more women are coming forward. There's, I say a lot more, than there was, research being done. Still not enough, because we know there's not enough funding put into women's health. But on average, they're saying it takes, 8 years. I know that now they've said that people from ethnic minority backgrounds, it's taken even longer for them to be diagnosed. So by the point that I was diagnosed, I don't even think I was angry anymore. I think there was just a sense of relief. If there's one thing I can say throughout this whole ordeal, I've never been angry about it, because I just wanted an answer, to be honest. And also, I am the kind of person, for whatever reason, these are the cards I've been dealt. And I've always been like that. There's no point in being angry. It's happened for whatever reason. But honestly, when finally, it was like validation when I was told. Because I remember I got referred, and also at the time I spoke to another friend who, funnily enough, had endometriosis. And when I described my symptoms...
Diagnosed endometriosis.
She had diagnosed endometriosis. Okay. And when I told her my symptoms, she went, I think you've got endometriosis. And I remember saying to her, I haven't. The way you talk about it and the way I talk about it, I was like, it's too different, because her pain was constant. So a lot of people think that your pain is only during your cycle. It's not. It can happen at any point.
Right.
So that's the other thing. So for me, at this moment in time, mine was only
During your cycle.
My period, or when I was menstruating, just before and just after as well. So I was trying to use what she'd been through, comparing it to myself, and so I was like, oh no, I definitely don't have it. So now going back to the appointment, so I'd had this conversation before then. I waited, didn't know, and the pain was getting worse. And I remember you said to me, Ben, didn't you? You went, we can't wait anymore. And I remember Ben saying, look, we pay for everything else in life, holidays, things for the children, we want to go out for meals. He said, I think it's time that we, paid for your health. And I was like, no, we can't do that. And he said, look, and at this point we have to remember it was COVID. So the NHS was inundated.
Yeah.
It was inundated.
Yeah.
And if we remember as well, at that time, waiting times were getting longer and longer and longer. And so what we decided to do was Ben said, let's go private. At the time, you had private healthcare, didn't you? For appointments, I think it was, wasn't it? And so he said, let's just at least go and get this appointment. So we took what the GP had written, because I'd still waiting for the referral for an ultrasound. I remember calling the GP and he said, look, I've referred you, but we don't know how long it's going to take. So we did go private. I had my ultrasound. It was the most painful thing ever, even just having, it was an internal ultrasound. And as soon as the lady did it, I remember she said, I can't say, she said, but I think you've got endometriosis. And I was like, really? I went to see the consultant as well. So they did an MRI scan as well. At this point, I still hadn't had the referral from the NHS come through either.
Yeah, so you're doing all this completely off your own back, aren't you, at this point?
Because the pain was actually getting worse. Now, this was towards the end of, when I say the end of COVID, the point where we had to isolate and everything, so I was starting to be able to go back in, weren't we? But, with the masks, etc. Had the MRI scan, and what that showed was that I had, I think it was, how many cysts did I?
It was ridiculous. It was above. It was between 7 and 10. Was it about 9? If you
I
went
think I had
for
about 9 cysts. And they said to me, the consultant, he went, you must have been in agony. He was like, how many times have you been in hospital for your pain? I was like, never.
None.
I was like, none. And all I could think in my head was, Ben told me this wasn't right. And I remember Ben even saying to me that week when I couldn't get out of bed, I'm taking you to the hospital. And I was like, no, what they're going to do, they'll just turn me away and say, oh, you're just having a period.
I think for me as well, being as naive as I was about endometriosis at that time, not even knowing what it was, when you see your wife, if it was your partner or anyone else in that kind of state, my immediate thought was not just this isn't right, your mind takes you to the kind of the worst places you can go in your mind, because I'm thinking, and I've never said this to you, but I'm looking at her and her symptoms and being in bed for a week, and then the kids will get put to bed, Aneesha will be asleep, I'll have some time downstairs to myself, sat there, and I'm there thinking she's either got something that's gone horribly wrong inside and something's going to rupture, because that's what you associate kind of really intense pain with, or they're going to do the tests and she's going to be riddled with cancer. That's where I'd got to in my own head, because the endometriosis hadn't even been touched on as a subject, as a symptom, as a condition to be managed. So we're still in this phase of trying to figure out what it is. Now, other people, maybe on this podcast, maybe in other things, lots of different walks of life, will have experienced similar things in terms of pain and that reality. And then when they do get an appointment, they get the worst possible news. Now, I obviously never said that to Aneesha or the kids, because it's my job to be strong and to help Aneesha as much as I can. But I remember on more than one occasion thinking, and it's silly really, now I look back, you're thinking, what am I going to tell the kids? How are we going to break this to her mum and dad when they tell us it's something really serious? And then you bring yourself back to it and you go, well, it might be okay, it could be something much more simple than that, so it'll be fine. But you are there because there's been no sort of further investigation, no detailed diagnosis, none of that. So you do I did the pieces of the puzzle myself in my own head. And as we all know, when you sit there and you get into your own head, you can go down any one of a number of different tracks. But I think for me, it was just because there's no evidence to say what this is. And until someone tells me what it is, I've got to think through every eventuality. So it was a really, you were going through it, you were going through the pain, it was an awful time for you, but it was just such an uncertain time for everyone, and the more we talk about it now, You mix it in with COVID and how that affected people and all that was going on. We weren't seeing our families as much as we'd like to. The children were being schooled at home.
Yeah.
You're trying to work in between all of that. You've got Aneesha struggling as much as she was. So yeah, looking back on it, it was a really uncertain, difficult time. But what I will say is that I think you sometimes doubt yourself in terms of how you handle it, the pain, the inconvenience of being in that pain and not being able to do as much as you want to do for me or the kids or for anyone else. But looking back on that time with me then saying, I'm there thinking all these things, what it might be, I wonder where, and I don't even know why I didn't ask, maybe I was scared. God knows where your head was at when you were having those moments, because you must have thought at points, like, I know you're a glass half full person generally, but you must have thought at certain points like, this is bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just so consumed by the pain. I couldn't even think beyond that because it was just so bad, if you remember.
Yeah.
And that's why, going back to what, you know, I was saying about even being told after the MRI that I had cysts, I was like, that's what it is. That's what the pain is, because I know in my family people have had cysts and had them removed. So that was enough for me to think, oh, that's what it is. And even when the consultant said to me, I can't believe how much pain you must have been in, and I was like, oh, even that was enough. You do you know what I mean?
Because
Just
somebody understood what you had been going on for years. Somebody validated what you were feeling and going through. So that must have been quite a huge relief for you.
It really was. It really was. And to come out and say to Ben, oh, this is what it is. Also going back to then what you said, and obviously I didn't realise at the time. So as part of when they're testing you for endometriosis, etc., you have to have a specific set of bloods, and they're about your markers in your body. CA1 something it is. Sorry, it's been a while now. Anybody listening will know exactly what I'm talking about, I'm sure. And what they do is that takes note of markers for cancer in your body. So when I did my bloods for that and the results came back, they were very high. So then I had to go back and say to Ben, the markers have come back high for cancer. Now what we were then told after is, look, by the consultant, when women have endometriosis, the markers can come back higher for cancer, because I think it mirrors some of the markers in your body.
It's inflammation, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think that's what it was. But obviously at the time, I had no idea that Ben was feeling this way. So when I came back and said that must have been almost feeding into your inner dialogue anyway.
It's funny, isn't it? Because in retrospect now, we're sat here talking about it, and it's years ago. You know, we're going back 5 or 6 years. There's probably now, on reflection, a lot we should have said to each other at that time. But I think as parents, when you're faced with something that's potentially not very nice, and for me as a person as well, you almost enter this really strange place in your mind where it's all about protection and carrying on as best you can. And so Aneesha's kind of dealing with that away from me. We're talking, of course we are, and I'm dealing with where I'm leading it into my head to go in, and the kids are seeing Aneesha, you know, in pain and in bed sometimes. And as a parent, again, perhaps it wasn't the right thing to do, but at the time you want to protect them. Mummy's fine, she's just not feeling very well. Let's go and put a movie on. Let's go and play football in the garden. Let's go and do whatever to create this sense of normality and isn't, you know, it's fine, you know, mummy will be okay. But the more I've learned about the condition now, it's probably more important than ever for people to talk about it, because the biggest thing that I've learned about endometriosis is that it's being brought to the forefront now, but it's been buried forever. And so there will be families who've gone through what we've gone through 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. And you're just trying to maintain this normality. But the best thing to do is to talk about it, to educate people, to know what it is, so that people can understand how it affects the person. I suppose what I'm trying to say is protecting people's important, but knowing exactly what that person is going through is more important than that. Because if you don't, as a man, I can never relate physically. I don't know what it's like. I haven't got the same anatomy as a female. I can't for a minute begin to sympathise. but I can try and understand, and I can see how it affected and affects Aneesha. So yeah, I think it was a really strange time of like, let's keep it normal, and even with our parents to some degree, right? You know, we told them as much as we knew at the time. But again, my view is that Aneesha would never, and still to a degree now, wouldn't ever give close family friends the full picture. Yeah, I'm struggling, but I'll be fine.
Yeah.
I'll be fine. Do you know what, Mum? I was in bed for a week.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago. But I completely understand why that's done, because I've just talked about it in terms of that protection. You don't want people to worry. We'll manage with this. We'll deal with it. But I think now, from what we've seen and talked to other people about it, it's just important that people are aware and it is talked about.
What about your kids? If I just go back to that difficult time during COVID, homeschooling, mum's in bed, things are not going right, you are worried. And I know you said you tried to keep some sort of normality for the kids, but surely it would have affected the kids at some level. Surely they must be asking some questions, because they can see mum is not well for a whole week. It's not normal. What was that like with the kids?
I'll say what I think really quickly, and then you please, because it's obviously your situation. I think the manifestation of what the children saw 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago has only properly come to the surface in the last 2 years.
What do you mean?
So my view is they did see that Aneesha wasn't well, but what we told them and how we acted was enough to keep them enough away from it for them to be normal. But the more time's gone on now, I think the more they absolutely do realise how it affected you and continues to affect you.
I think so, and it has affected them as well. You are right. I would say then it's probably different because, like you said, I think we protected them a bit more.
And they were younger as well.
And they were younger, so it was only 2.
Yeah, she was tiny, wasn't
That was
she?
it, yeah, and our son was 6. He
Yeah,
was
6 or 7,
so there's 4
wasn't
years
he?
between them. So going back to that time, and then I will share why it's showing up more now, as Ben has said. I had an operation then. So going back to, I mentioned they found the cysts. I was then told, we can do the operation for you, or, you can be referred back into the NHS. How long is the waiting list? NHS was 2 years.
Wow.
And I remember going to Ben. Ben was like, you cannot wait 2 years. And I also asked the question, I was like, now if I've got that many cysts and they are that bad, what's the likelihood that they could rupture? And, the consultant did say at the time, they possibly could. I can't say, but the chances, yes,
they could.
They could. Okay, so really...
And that would bring with it its own complications.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
So I was like, I can't really, don't have a choice really. I have a choice, don't get me wrong, but in my own mind I was like, I need to do this. And I'd come this far. I think there's part of me that was like, if I don't do this, then I could end up going back into the system and then I'll get lost and then I'll be back to square one again. So we did have the operation at the time.
Can I just ask a question? I'm sorry I'm stopping you.
No.
Why did you justify in your own head so much because you were going private or you had to spend a little bit of money on yourself? Why are you trying to justify it to yourself that I deserve to get this treatment?
I don't know, it's really bizarre. And I think I've been like that all the way through. Even when I talk about it, I'm really conscious of saying, oh yeah, we had to go private. Because
I can see that as weighing very heavy on you.
Yeah, and I don't know why it is. Like with the appointments, we did get those through your
health insurance,
but the operation wasn't covered, so we did have to pay for the operation. And as you can imagine, it was a lot of money. I think sometimes there's so many people now that have the condition. Well, there was always people that had the condition, but you're hearing more and more. And the more I'm now in the community of women with endometriosis and other, conditions that go alongside with it. And they aren't in the position I'm in. And so there will be a waiting list and there will wait years. And so I think a part of me almost carries a bit of guilt on behalf of the others because I was in a position to just go and have the operation. And I got that operation within 6 weeks. Wasn't it?
I don't think it was even that. I'm sure it was in
they
about
had a cancellation.
Yeah,
so it was meant to be 6
Wow.
weeks and then I had a cancellation and I had the operation. And so, I think that there's a part of me that probably feels a little bit guilty.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you went for the operation, and is that the cyst removal operation?
Yeah, so I went in. So again, people that have endometriosis or know or have relatives that have it will know that the only way you can be diagnosed at this point with endometriosis is through having a laparoscopy. So I went in, and they went in to remove all my cysts. And I remember the consultant asking me, you know, you have to go through all your paperwork, and once I'd agreed it, and then there was, look, if we go in and things are damaged, are you happy for us to remove your ovaries, for example? And I just lied. I just said I want more children, because then the other part of my brain went to, I do not want to start menopause just yet. I was like, I've just dealt with all this. I can't start menopause, you know, at that point I was 32. I was like, I just can't do it. And so I remember him saying, okay, that's fine. So once I came round, I had the operation. Ben couldn't come with me because of COVID at that point, so he got me off outside and then had to leave me there. Couldn't see me after, not until I was obviously...
I remember that first phone call, really late in the evening, wasn't it, when you were just coming round from the anaesthetic?
Yeah. And so I went in and had it done, and I was waiting, etc. And then when I came round, I was very sore and drowsy from an anaesthetic, as you can imagine. And you're not told anything at that point. You have to wait for the consultant to come back round. The next morning, the consultant was doing the rounds and came to talk to me, and he said, we did find, we're able to remove your cyst. So I had a 10 centimetre cyst on one ovary, and then I think I had about another 6 or 7 on the other ovary. He said it was completely damaged. We had to remove the ovary. He said your other one was also damaged, but he said after what you said, we didn't remove the ovary, but they managed to remove the cyst. He also then said you were completely covered in endometriosis. He said it was everywhere. So he said we managed to remove as much as we possibly could. I believe we got all of it, but that's the thing with endometriosis. The endometriomas could be anywhere. So
what is endometriosis?
So it's tissue. So it's a tissue lining that normally when you have a period it would, release, but it moves to different parts of your body and then it adheres to your womb. He also then told me not only did I have endometriosis, I also have a condition called adenomyosis as well. And what is that? So I have both. So endometriosis is to do with the womb, so it grows outside the tissue, impacts the outside. And adenomyosis is in the lines of your uterus, so it's inside your womb, in the walls, I should say, of your uterus. So I have both. I was like, okay, great. But again, in a way, I was like, so that's it, finally. I've been told I've got the condition. You've done the operation. It's all gone. Amazing. And he said, we carried on talking. He said, look, you should normally, you should be absolutely fine for about 5 years. He said, and you should be pain free for about 5 years. I was like, okay, great. He said, sometimes it will completely go. He said, but sometimes it can come back for women. I felt validated in that moment, because since then, there's so many women that have gone in, had the operation.
Were you pain free then after the operation?
Yeah, so I was pain free for 9 months.
Yeah, I was going to say, it was less than a year. So Aneesha had been told by the consultant who'd done the surgery that on average, as she said, this should almost guarantee you 5 years roughly of feeling relatively normal. So you can imagine, I can't imagine what you must have felt when that pain came back after 9 months. But for me, and again it sounds a really selfish thing to say, for me, like, we've been through all this, we've got to a point where we think she's got a little bit of respite and can live a relatively normal life for a few years. 9 months, and here we go again.
And I remember, I still remember, do you remember? Ben was going on a stag, and he was getting up in the early hours of the morning. It must have been about 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
And he was stirring, and I remember I literally shot up out of bed, and I remember I just turned to you, do you remember? And I just went, it's back. And he looked at me and he went, what do you mean? And I went, the pain's back. And I remember just feeling that pain, and I just thought, this can't be happening. This can't be happening. And then obviously Ben didn't want to go away, and I said, you've got to go, I'll be fine. Maybe it's just something that's happening, following a few months, and my body's healing, so maybe it's just its way of adjusting. And again, I started telling myself all these things. You went off on your stag. I ended up having to call my mum round because the pain was that bad. I sat in the bath for hours, and bless, my son, he was like looking after his sister, and he was like, Mum, are you in pain again? I was like, yeah. They're a bit older, obviously, at this point. Only a little bit older. But
that thing as well, isn't it, about protecting the normality? So I'd flown across to Portugal, and I remember phoning Aneesha when we'd got there, saying, obviously this morning you're in a really bad way. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. I'm feeling all right. So it's been tough, like it's been a bit of pain, but
Yeah.
I think it's all right now. And subsequently, when I get back home after 3 or 4 days, I find out that Mum's been round and that Jane's had to look after his sister and the rest of it. And I know exactly why you did it, because I'm away, let Ben have a good time, you know, just been through this and whatever. But again, it's that protection thing.
And if you remember, you came back and I did end up in hospital again.
Yeah, you did.
So I had to call the ambulance because the pain was, I just couldn't cope with the pain. And that is then consistently how it's been. So I've just had to learn to manage the pain again, going back to GPs. As time has gone on, we've started talking to the children more at this point. It was important that they knew. They always knew. I was always very open with them in terms of this is what's happening, but probably not in terms of the pain as such.
Ben, as a man, how helpless did you feel when Aneesha would go through this pain? Because as a man, from what I understand, I'm not a man, so I'm just guessing. You want to fix things. You
course.
want solution to the problems. You kind of have blinkers on. You're looking, right, this is a problem. How do we get it sorted? But you can't do anything.
No, it's the worst feeling in the world. And for me, how I am as a person is, and this is just me, I'm not speaking for any other man because people are different. My most important thing from when I married Aneesha, and for everyone in my life, is that it's my job to protect everyone, right? So whatever needs fixing, as you've said, I will try and fix it. But to watch Aneesha be in pain as a man, and it can never happen, it sounds absurd to even talk about it the way I'm going to, but you want to take that pain from her and give it to me. I'll have it, I'll take the pain, I'll do that bit, because that's, again, as a man, that's easy. I'll be in pain. You be there for Jane and Amelia, you're their mom. You go and do that. The kids don't need me as much as they need mom, which I do. That's a personal thing. I do think that is true, by the way. I do think kids need their moms more than their dads to a degree. And from my perspective, the thing that I haven't done properly throughout all this is that I've let it make me angry.
It made you angry?
Why her? Why have my kids got to see their mum going through this? Why has Aneesha got to have this condition where there's no cure? And again, because we're glass half full people, I'll catch myself and I'll take a breath and I'll go, but we're very lucky. We've got a lovely family and we've got good jobs and a nice house and life's good, but it's always there. And it's not affecting daily life, because on a good day you do what you need to do and it's not really spoken about. But Aneesha might say, even now, I've got a bit of a twinge. And straight away I'm like, do you need to take something? Are you okay? Is it a flare up? Is it going to stop us doing what we need to do today? Sit down, have some water, do this, do that. Because that's the man in me, maybe just wanting to try and cure that situation, to rectify it immediately. But the best thing to do is to let Aneesha deal with it, because I can't deal with the pain. So if Aneesha now needs an hour to herself, I'll try and then take the kids away and we'll go and do something and then check back in. And are you okay? Should we go to this dinner? Should we do this? Should we do that? So I think for me, frustration and anger have been two big emotions that probably have got the better of me
At times.
at times.
This question you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But when you were seeing each other, you knew what Aneesha goes through, you knew the pain she goes through, and yes, it's worsened over the years. Did you know how bad it would have become? Did you not want to at any point say, actually, this is not something I'm ready to, I cannot handle this, so I'm not going to be carrying on with this person? It's a difficult question, but I just want to try and understand what your thought process was before you even got married.
So to be completely honest, there's two aspects of this. The first and the most important part of it is that as soon as I met Aneesha, I knew I wanted to marry her. So that was
A done deal.
from day one. That was a done deal from day one, if she'd have me, which she did, thankfully. So that, you know, I'm quite old school in that way, around whatever comes with that, you deal with it. No one's a perfect person. Things will crop up in life and we'll have to deal with them together. So that was fine. But to be perfectly honest, from a practical level, even when we were dating, it was only about bad periods, because I don't think it had clicked for either of us when we were dating, and probably even when we were engaged, that this would potentially be a condition that we'd need to manage together for the next lifetime. So I think in the early days of us, that wasn't a consideration for me, because as bad as you'd be sometimes with pain, it was always, it's a bad period. And, you know, because we didn't live together until we'd got married, I probably never saw it as much. Whereas now, because we live together, you see it on the daily.
Yeah.
When we were dating, if Aneesha had been on her period and I hadn't seen her for 3 days, she could have been telling me, I'm struggling a bit, I've had a bad period. Oh yeah, okay, we're still seeing each other on Thursday. Because it didn't compute with me at that time. Did it for you?
No, I think like you said, it was just a bad period. I never thought
Yeah.
this is what it'd become.
Yeah.
Or that, you know, I would end up living with, well, essentially it's a chronic illness.
I want to go back to 9 months when you were pain-free. Were you genuinely pain-free, or you'd still had a little bit of pain here and there?
So the 9 months were honestly no pain, no nothing. I was like, so this is what it feels
This is what
like.
normal is.
Yeah. Excuse me. And also to have a period and have no pain. And you know, after that I used to speak to friends and they were like, oh yeah, it just comes and goes. I was like, it just comes and goes. They're like, yeah, sometimes you might have a bit of a niggle or you might feel a bit tired or a bit moody or whatever, but they were like, other than that, I couldn't believe it. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, that's me now.
Yeah.
And then the 9 months came.
What happened then?
So after that it was just, well, we're now here, aren't we?
Yeah, we're back to not square one, because we know so much more about the condition and how it affects you and treatments, but practically, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so this time round I was like, I'm going to have to try something else. And especially with the children now getting older, they become more aware of things as well. So, you know, we sat down, we told the children exactly, and I already told them a little bit about why Mummy was having an operation at the time, but now we told them properly what was going on over the years, especially for my son. It was important for him to know.
Why?
I think about periods in general, I wanted him to know about it, because he was as he was getting older, you know, he's going to have friends, he's got a sister, you know, he's always going to be surrounded by women. You know, if they bleed or they were to leak, you know, through their skirt or something, I don't want him to be laughing or, ugh, what's that?
Yeah.
That's a time where that individual needs to feel safe.
Yeah.
You know, that girl might need you to help her, or, you know, if all the other boys are laughing, you would be the one that maybe says, you know, what are you laughing for? You know, just help her, let me go and help her or something. They're both quite mature, actually. Both the children are with this. And when their dad hasn't been there, not that it's right, the children have helped me. You know, bless my son, he'll massage my back for me. Probably won't like me telling everybody this. You know, my daughter, she'll stroke my hand and she'll be brushing my hair out my face. What can I do, Mummy? You know, can I rub your tummy? Can I hold you? And they shouldn't have to do this.
But why not?
But this is it. And, you know, my son will look after his sister. You know, he's now he'll be 14 soon. She's 9. You know, he's made her dinner for her because I can't do anything. Because my flare-ups, this is another thing now. So before, they tended to be around my period. The lead up towards me having my operation, it was at any point. It was consistent, you know, consistently, sorry, I was in pain.
Wow.
Even when it wasn't the time of the month. It was awful. That could have been to do with the cysts as well. But since, obviously, it's all come back, and even now, I will get pain at any time.
At any time.
Any time at all.
The best way to describe it as an observer of it, as someone who's not going through the condition but is living with someone with the condition, it's like the lottery but in a bad way. And what I mean by that is, and this is no exaggeration, and people who've got the condition and people who live with the condition will understand, you don't know from one day to the other what that day is going to look like from a pain perspective. You just don't know.
No, you don't.
That's the best way I can describe it.
It's absolutely true, and that's the hardest thing. If anything, that's what I find difficult. And also, I think the other thing is, you know, all those women out there that have the condition. I mean, the other thing is there's women out there that might have endometriosis that don't have any pain.
Oh.
So not all women that have endometriosis have pain.
Right.
However, it might be that they can't conceive, for example. And then the only time they'd find out that they've got endometriosis is when maybe, you know, they're looking into why they can't have children, and that's when they find out. So it's really interesting, the condition. People just think it's this one thing.
Yeah.
You know, oh, it's pain at the time of the month.
Yeah.
No, it's not. And it affects us all in different ways. That's the other thing. So for me, like I said, I can be in pain. If I don't catch it at the right time and take my meds, the pain will roughly last around between 8 to 10 hours. and I will be in agony. Constant.
High level pain.
Yeah, honestly. And when I say, I will have taken 2 ibuprofen, 2 cocodamol, and it will do nothing at all. I've been given tramadol by the doctors. I didn't want to take that. I've got 2 children.
Yeah.
I don't want to take these things. Morphine.
Yeah, the last hospital visit, Aneesha was in hospital a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
Around Easter time. And again, it's going off at a bit of a tangent here, but one of my frustrations about this whole process with endometriosis is it seems to me that depending again on the look of the draw with the medical personnel you come across and deal with, the vast majority, there've been 2 or 3 who've been unbelievably amazing. Absolute credit to their profession, have listened to Aneesha, have done some investigating work to find out what the cause is and what's going on. The vast majority, 2 words, it's about pain management. So forget the fact you've got endo. If you're in pain, have this liquid morphine. Liquid morphine is going to knock you out. Now, when you've got 2 young children, we lead a busy life. We work. We're quite socially active as a family. Let's go and do this, let's go and do that. A meal here, a day out here. Cram as much into life as we can. Your solution is for Aneesha to be laid out for 2 days. It's not feasible. But and Aneesha has said that to them. And they sort of look a bit like, well, yeah, but if you take that, your pain will go away. Yeah, but she'll be in bed for 2 days. So she doesn't want to do that. And when they do, they have this quizzical look about as if you're almost a bit crazy for not taking the medication.
And like you've said, it is strange because a couple of months ago I did unfortunately end up in hospital again for 4 days, I think I was on there, because we couldn't get the flare-ups under control of the pain. I remember, and I will share this with you because going back to the children, this really did impact the children and I did not know. I think my son's very good at covering it up. He has said a number of times through passing comments, why do you have to have it? Other people's mums don't have anything. And I find that upsetting at times, but I've come to realise he's not saying it to be horrible. It's because he's upset, and he doesn't want to see his mum going through this. But like life in general, lots of people can be going through lots of things, but will only see what's on the outside. Yeah. And that's what I've tried to also teach the children is you could have a number of people, look around the playground and all the mums look happy and, well, majority of the time, and dads. And you wouldn't think there's anything wrong with anybody, but we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. So I said, that's the same with me. I said, when I come to pick you up, if anybody looked at me, would anybody have any idea? And no. So the last time I ended up in hospital, like I said, a couple of months ago, we'd had to call out, Ben called the ambulance, and unfortunately what happened that night was I kept being sick, and you'd had got up in the night and you couldn't open the bathroom door properly because I'd fainted in the bathroom from the pain.
Yeah, I couldn't get into the bathroom.
So you couldn't get into the bathroom. You'd eventually manage to get in, wake me up and get me out. I'd come back into the bed, you'd put me to sleep and I was like, I'll be fine. That's always my thing, isn't it? I'll be fine, just leave me
just
for a bit.
Just give me a minute.
Just give me a minute, let me take the tablets, I'll be fine. And then I think I must have passed out again a few times. But this time I kept being sick from the pain, which has happened in the past.
Yeah.
So then I can't keep the medication down either. Ambulance came out. Very fortunate for me, my parents don't live far and they do so much, honestly. They're so supportive.
God knows.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to do it without them. In every way, they're physically supportive, mentally, everything. So they came round and the paramedics, I think they gave me gas and air first.
Yeah.
Didn't touch you.
It didn't do anything. And so she said, look, we're going to have to administer morphine. So she gave me the first lot of morphine. It didn't do anything at all.
Wow.
So then she said, we're going to have to give you more. And so I think they gave me a little bit more. And then the last dose, it just wasn't going, the pain wasn't. They were trying everything when she was staying for ages. And then eventually they had to take me away in the ambulance. And she said, I can't give you any more after this.
You'd literally, if you had more, you'd literally be in overdose territory, wouldn't you?
So they gave me everything they could. It just would not go. And to be fair, the paramedic said, you must be in a lot of pain if this pain isn't going. I mean, she was magnificent. They both were. They
were great.
They were amazing, honestly. And it was interesting because both of them spoke about, one had a sibling that has got endometriosis and the other one also had a best friend that had endometriosis as well. I'm saying,
it's quite common,
honestly,
by the sounds of it.
The more you talk about it, you don't realise how many people have it or know of somebody that has the condition. Now, I know I'm going a bit all over the place, I apologise. knowing how many people have it, women are struggling, yet there's still not that much funding. But like I said, it's the same in a lot of women's health, and I know they're really looking at the women's health strategy. But I remember going into hospital, they'd asked me who my consultant was. I said, I've been discharged from a consultant. I'm not under anybody at all. And they're like, well, what did your last consultant say? And I said, well, he said my only option was to have a full hysterectomy. And that was the only thing he said he could do.
But would that guarantee
No.
so you could still continue
Yes.
to get pain?
Yeah.
So Aneesha would have to go through the menopause early, knowing there was no guarantee that would stop it. So she could go through the menopause and deal with that, and then be laid up in bed a week after because it's come back.
And I suppose because you've had the cysts removed once and the pain came back in 9 months, you're not that keen on rushing into another major operation because there's no guarantee.
Right, yeah. And so many women that have endometriosis have a number of operations. You know, one is nothing really. They say 2, 3, 4 on average. When I came out of hospital though, the kids had found it difficult this time.
I think, yeah, and just before Aneesha carries on with sort of that description of coming out of hospital, something's just clicked in my head with this. As much as we've tried to protect the children, they've seen a lot.
Yeah.
They have seen ambulances come to the house regularly.
My God.
They've seen different doctors come into the house, paramedics come into the house. And I think when Tisha had mentioned about sort of how it's affected the kids, this example we're talking about now, of you going into hospital most recently, what people have to remember is when other people, so Aneesha's pain sort of attack had started at 3 a.m. She's passed out in the bathroom, she's passed out in the bedroom. We've probably kept that away from the kids. We've just about been able to be quiet enough to not wake them up. But then in the morning, while all the other kids are having their breakfast and watching the TV or whatever, Jay and my son has got out of bed, has poked his head round the door, seen his mum laid out flat on the bed with 2 paramedics each side of her inserting an IV line into her hand and administering morphine. Now, when I say that out loud, although they're doing that to help you, that is a lot for children to see. He's not expecting to see that.
No.
And the more I think about it now and we talk about it now, I think they've done an amazing job. I think as much as it has affected them in terms of how they are with their mum and Jane saying why's mum got it and the rest of it, fundamentally they've been real soldiers with it.
Honestly, they really have.
You know, it's a lot.
It is, and I remember coming out of hospital this time, and our daughter, she struggled this time, I think because she's a bit older. And then we found out, she said, Mummy, I was in class today and I just burst out crying. I said, is everything okay? She said, I was just so sad about your endometriosis. And she said, I saw you. She said, when the paramedics, because we tried to keep her, my dad had been there, and I said, Dad, keep her away. She said, and I saw the IV drip. She said, Mummy, she said, you had a mask on your face and they were injecting you. She said, and you were rolling around on the bed in pain. And then she said, are you going to die? I'm not going to die, darling. And she went, but she said, I saw all of that. And she said, all I kept thinking was that you were going to die, or one day I'll find you and that you've died. You know, and I'd never thought about it that much. And I suppose, part of me then felt bad because I thought I've never actually sat the kids down and said, this condition won't kill me. And that's the conversation I then had with them. I said,
I was
it
going to say
won't
you
kill
did.
me. I said, but I am, as you know, it's going to make me difficult because the kids get frustrated. So the amount of doctor's appointments I have, hospital appointments I have, the kids will say, you're going to the hospital again? What's the matter now, Mummy?
And there's sometimes panic, don't they?
Yeah, what's wrong with you?
Why are you going?
Why are you going?
What now? What does that mean?
Why have you got to have a blood test? What does that mean, etc. So we have to be explaining. So on top of like a normal childhood where you have to talk about my son's becoming a teenager, you're having all those conversations.
Yeah.
I'm having to have all of these conversations as well with them, and so is Ben, to explain all these things. My daughter even said to me, she's dreading having her period. She said, oh, Mummy, I don't want to have a period. I don't want to be in pain.
How much of it is a worry for you as parents?
I am.
It's a big one for you, isn't it?
It is, because I know my mum's sister definitely had it, and I've got a feeling my mum probably had it, but she just didn't know from the things that she's mentioned, and so I am fearful. I can't stop it. There's nothing I can do.
Is it possible to catch it early and then resolve it? No.
If you've got it, you've got it. It's just depending on to whatever degree
Exactly
it affects
that.
you. It's different for every person,
And
isn't
this
it?
is it. And I can only hope that with research and more funding that things will be put into place that can cure it. or they can find other ways of diagnosing you without you having to have an operation, you know, or they find other ways of being able to manage.
I want to ask about what did you do that helped you, which was not pain relief?
Yeah, so I did find this probably the most difficult, to be honest. So I went to see somebody that, he's a doctor, but he actually specialises in herbs,
Natural remedies.
Yeah. So I thought I'd heard lots of positive things, and my mum had already been, so I thought, let me give it a go. So I went in, and he said, first of all, I need to completely change my diet, almost give my body a complete reset, because he said a lot of people don't realise that your gut health impacts your body massively and the conditions that live within it. I was already vegetarian, but he asked me to go plant-based, so I cut out dairy, which I did find difficult because I love cheese. But he explained everything. So what he said was, the conditions I have with adenomyosis and endometriosis, he said they cause inflammation and your hormones are always fluctuating. He said when you put dairy into your body, he said you think about milk. He said it's full of hormones from the cow. He said, so you're putting additional hormones into your body. So he said, that's going to increase your inflammation and your flare-ups. So I said, fine, okay, so I'll cut dairy out, eggs, everything. And then he also then continued to change my diet. So he talked about chili. I didn't have that. So he said, don't have chilies. I was like, I'm Indian. How am I not going to have chili? You know, in our food. I was like, how do I do that then? And he said, what we don't realise is, he said, I said, but, you know, people in India, he said, yes, in India, people eat so much chili. He said, but look at the climate there.
Yeah.
He said, they sweat it out.
Yeah.
He said, here, we eat chili and the heat remains in the body.
Very valid point.
And he said, so you're heating your body when it's already struggling with inflammation, which is to do with heat. And so he said, you need to cut chili out your body. And then he said a number of other things, didn't he, as well? Even things like mushrooms. He said, you can eat mushrooms, but only chestnut mushrooms, not white mushrooms, because the fungi is different. And that will impact you. No
Cut down
processed foods. Tomatoes. Citrus isn't good for you.
It was easier to count the things that Aneesha could eat than couldn't. Because the couldn't list was like this long.
Do you remember I cried?
Yeah.
He walked out of the room and I cried, and Ben looked at me and I was like, I can't do this. I was like, this is harder than anything else, because I thought, what am I going to eat?
Yeah.
You know, and we're a family that enjoys food, you know. I know this is a cliche, but coming from an Indian family, you know, it's all about food.
Yeah.
Food is life, isn't it?
It really is.
The centre of all the events, conversations, everything, yeah.
And then there was me thinking, what will I eat? Or I won't be able to have this, or, you know, what will I do, etc. But then, like Ben said, he said, think bigger picture. He said, if this is going to help you, you have to do it. The other thing was, don't have any caffeine. And a lot of people actually that have endometriosis, it does cause flare-ups, caffeine does, and alcohol. So no alcohol, no caffeine, no dairy. I'm already vegetarian anyway, no eggs, no chili. He then I had some tablets, didn't I? Some natural remedies, which were made specifically for me. And I had teas and things like that, didn't I? Which were not pleasant, but
I think the whole ethos behind it all, and like Aneesha's talking about the food types, endometriosis is so much about flare and heat and pain, and some doctors and people who've got it describe it as that it's like that going off in your body, isn't it, all the time? So a lot of the herbal medication that was provided to Aneesha was almost like it was to cool that fire, wasn't it? It's to keep everything cool inside.
And also what he said to me, he said, I'm not treating the symptoms, he said, I'm treating the root cause. So he was also trying to balance out my hormones. He said that's where it's starting. He spoke about my adrenal glands and things. He said we need to balance all of that out to reduce all the symptoms. And he said it won't happen overnight. Again, I was in a fortunate position that I could go down this route, so I stripped everything out. It was hard.
I was just going to say that it's a really good point, because, you know, Aneesha's spoken about the struggle of the condition itself, which is bad enough, but then to be told by someone that you have to lose even more of the things you enjoy, the simple things like food, you have to process that.
Yeah.
Not only do you have to process that, you then have to change your whole style of eating.
Yeah. What
you eat, when you eat it, don't eat after a certain time, and all that kind of thing. Not only do you have to do all that, then once you start doing that, you have to wait months to feel the benefits of it, and that is no criticism to the individual who's helped Aneesha so much.
Oh no, he was
But when you've been going through it for years and years, you crave someone to just almost go, do you know what, take that tablet and it's all done. But it's always this process.
And it was, and of course it was, I'd already had a knock-on effect, you know, I'd make plans, I'd have to cancel them. And it might not just be my plans, the kids, if we were going to a wedding and we've been to parties, I've had the biggest flare-ups. Remember recently, honestly, I was in pain for about 8 hours. The tablets then make you tired and drowsy. You then have to aftermath of that. I will get up, get ready, and I'll go. I'll go to work. I will stand up in front of people. I'll present. I will facilitate, and I will be in pain. I'll have a TENS machine going. I will have taken my tablets because I can't just stop. So I have to, unless I am in agony, and I mean fainting or passing out or being sick, I will carry on doing exactly what I have to do.
You have done incredibly in your career. You know, you've achieved a lot. Where do you get the resilience to? Because it's quite easy in your condition to say, you know what, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to give up work because, and Ben would be like, yeah, but I totally get it that you wouldn't be able to. Where do you get your resilience from?
I think that's a hard question.
You don't know any different?
Yeah, I don't think I do. Like you said, maybe I'm glass half full, but maybe this is moving more towards now my faith, spirituality. I believe everything is written. I don't believe that I have had a say as such over my path, and this was meant to be a part of my path. And so I can either let it defeat me or I can carry on. And the more I dwell in the pain, the worse it can be sometimes. So at least if I'm doing something else, it takes my mind away from it. So even though the pain is still there, I'm not concentrating and thinking purely about the pain. I'm thinking about something else. So that's almost happening in the background. And then whatever I'm doing is happening in front of me right now. Like I said, unless it's really bad and I really can't cope, I just think, you know, I need to get on with it. And it's not just about me. You know, there's people relying on me. There's, you know, my husband, my children, work. I don't like letting people down. You know, I like showing up for people. And you know, as well, I think a part of it is showing up for myself. And telling myself, you know what, even though you are going through these difficulties, you can do it. I am really grateful that I have the strength to get up and stand and talk, you know, and carry on with my day. I am grateful that I've got a husband that, you know, even if I'm struggling, and he will say to me, you're in pain this morning, why are you going to work? I'll be like, I'll be fine. And he'll say, okay, if you need anything though, you phone me. And there's been times where I've had to phone Ben and he's had to drive to come and get me from work because I've struggled so bad. I've got parents that support me, you know, and if anything's needed, friends. I am blessed at work. I've got an amazing manager that if I've got any difficulties, not everyone has that support or that environment in the workplace. And so really I have, even though I've got this condition, my resilience comes from having an environment that I guess supports me and allows me to thrive. Yeah.
That's really well said. I want to ask a question, Aneesha. You have a brilliant manager now who obviously supports you, and I know you have done some work at work to make it endometriosis-friendly as well. So I'm going to talk about that in a second, like what that entails and everything. But in the past, have you been in environments where you were not supported?
Yes.
And how did that make you feel? What was that episode like?
Yeah, so I think one of the things is when you have not only my condition, if you have any illnesses, you know, chronic illnesses, if you are stressed or going through any difficulties, you're going to trigger it in some way. It flares it up. So I remember being in my last place of work, and that was when I had the operation, wasn't it? And they were fine with it, you know, I was having an operation. They knew I'd dealt with pain. I don't think they knew how bad it was, and I kind of kept it hidden a little bit. But when I was off work, I told my boss, and they were good. But after I'd had my operation and I came back, I think in their minds it was, you've had the operation, so everything should be fine now. And then I was getting more and more stressed out, and the pain was getting worse again following the 9 months. And I was trying to say that I can't deal with what you're giving me right now. It's going to impact my health, and it wouldn't matter what I said. Nobody was listening. My manager at the time was good, but the person above them just wouldn't listen. And so it got to a point where, if you remember, I was in and out of hospital continuously. And I remember we both sat down. I was like, I cannot deal with this. And Ben, you said, I think
Resign.
Just resign.
Go in tomorrow and tell them thank you. It's not working out.
And so I'd been off sick again with the condition, and I did go into work, and I had no job or anything to go to, and I handed in my notice and I resigned because I couldn't cope. And I remember people saying to me, oh, where are you going to? What job have you got? I was like, I don't have another job to go to. I just couldn't take it anymore because I know what the stress does to me as well.
Yeah. So what does an endometriosis-friendly workplace look like?
Yeah, so we are fortunate now that we have committed to becoming an endometriosis-friendly employer. So what that looks like is, we have a wonderful group of, there's 8 endometriosis champions. And again, it was my boss, amazing, who wanted us to really look into this because she could see the impact it was having on me. But what it looks like is educating the organisation to create the right environment to nurture and bring out the best in those individuals that have the condition, so they can thrive at work and not just be another number, being off sick. Oh, that person's absent, or they're not working the way they should be. Okay, a lot of people can't work, maybe come onto campus all the time, or they can't do X, Y and Z, but what could we do? So it's about working with managers, educating them, maybe working with colleagues who have other colleagues that might have the condition. It's about, it's about moving from empathy to action and compassion. That's what it's about, because sometimes we can empathise, often sympathise rather than even empathise, but how do we ever move it into a different space? And this was about, okay, now it's time to take action, and like I said, and become more compassionate. And to be honest, as we see what's happening in the world, etc., isn't that what we need?
Yeah, absolutely.
More of.
If somebody listening to us today says, great initiative, I think I would like to see how we can apply that in our workplace as well, what are those 1 or 2 initial things they can start doing to make their environment more endometriosis friendly?
Yeah, so what I would say is there is an amazing charity called Endometriosis UK. That's who we went through. They speak on behalf of all women with endometriosis, adenomyosis, polycystic ovary syndrome, and many other conditions, and they will support you through that journey. There's lots of different things that you would need to work on in your organisation. How are you educating people? How are you working with HR? Where are you looking at your policies? How are you driving change throughout the organisation? So there's a number of different things that you would need to look at, and different people you would need to work alongside to become an endometriosis friendly employer. But I would say some of the first steps would be approach that charity because they're amazing.
Wonderful. So Ben, I'll come to you. If you see a couple who's struggling with a similar condition or a condition which might be different to endometriosis, but it's still a struggle, what advice would you give to that couple? How should they navigate their life?
Always talk to each other. I think it sounds a bit of a cliche, but I think no matter what the obstacle, what the issue, 2 people working at it together is always better than doing something by yourself. And I think that's applicable to endometriosis or any other condition that people might be working with. I think, as Aneesha said, I share her view in that everyone's path is written. So whatever's going to come your way is going to come your way. I think accept it would probably be a stretch, because if people are going through a really difficult time, it's very hard to accept that things are difficult. But if you do accept it, rather than be angry about it, more doors open in terms of solutions to the problem.
Yeah.
If you hunker down and say, we don't need anyone, we can sort this out, just me and you, won't work as well as if you bring other people in. Endometriosis friendly employer, friends, family. You start speaking about things with people. And I think going back a few years, Aneesha's already mentioned about community, strength was always perceived to be everything's perfect. Look at them. Money, house, car, been married for years, kids, everything's perfect.
Holidays, beautiful
Holidays,
photos,
yeah,
Facebook
absolutely.
updates, Instagram.
That's not real. The realest people I know, and like Aneesha, some of the strongest people I know, are the ones that are brave enough to say, do you know what? We are going through this as a family. I'm going through this as a person. I'm not going to let it define me or define us. But because you now know about it, I'll tell you more about it. You can learn more about it. You can know what might be helpful to me to get me through it. So I think to be open, to be honest with people, on the whole, people are generally pretty good. And I think as much as you can be afraid of exposing them to this nasty condition that I've got and it's debilitating and all the rest of it, it is sometimes hard for people to hear that you're not going through such a good time. But the future is much easier to navigate with a community around you, rather than just trying to shield it from everyone and putting that veneer on of, hi, we're fine, everything's great. Aneesha's a great example of that.
Yeah.
Years ago, we'd have gone out for a social event with friends. She will have been in bed for 8 hours, just about got enough energy to go out. How are you, Aneesha? All good? Yeah, fine. How are you? Flip it back to the person. Let's not talk about me. How are you? Whereas now, I'd say everyone we know, friends or family, workplace acquaintances, know about the condition. So now it's flipped and Aneesha will say, do you know what? I've had a really difficult week actually, but I'm feeling okay to be here now. So let's enjoy the night. And I just think it's easier when you're open to not have that other battle. You've got enough to battle about with the condition. If people know, you haven't got to be having that internal battle of, oh my God, you've got to pretend that you're really happy and that you're well and everything's fine. Because again, that could be a flare. Because it's a stress. You're trying to repress your true emotions. So I think my advice to anyone would be open and honest with each other. Be open and honest with the people around you, and the community will kind of take care of the rest, and you will get much more support through people knowing.
Another question. Do you talk about what Aneesha goes through, what this condition is, the pain, the details of it with any men around you in your workplace, or, you know, I don't know if you go for sports or whatever. So do you talk to them? And what is the feedback? Do they tend to say, oh, it's a woman problem, why are you even talking about it? Or are they more interested to find out about it? What's their reaction like?
I think it's a mix. So where I work, the management structure is predominantly male. It's quite a traditional place in that regard, in terms of the hierarchy. They've been brilliant about all of it, and I've never tried to pretend the condition is anything other than what it is. I've been honest with them. This is what the condition is. This is what's happening. This is why I'm going to be late into work because Aneesha's not well and I've got to drop the kids off at school, or anything it might be, or this is the reason I've got to leave at 3 o'clock because there's a hospital appointment Aneesha's going to that I'd like to be there for. They've been brilliant with it. And I think there's almost, might not be the right word, there's almost a curiosity when you start talking to people about it, because rather than just go, oh, it sounds like a bit of a woman's problem, so we better not go near that. I think as time is changing and going on, people are more interested to know what it really means. And maybe I'm in a fortunate position because of the men that I'm surrounded with in my life. My dad, my father-in-law, my brother-in-law, my friends. We all enjoy quite an open relationship anyway. That's probably one of the things that I used to do in the past too much. If you want to find something out, ask me and I'll tell you. I don't care what people think. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And I think when you are like that, as Aneesha is with her condition, open, upfront, honest, I am suffering from this. This is what it is. I found that when I say to people, this is what Aneesha's going through, this is what we're going through as a family, they'll listen and they'll ask me how I am. But more importantly, a lot of the time, even if I'm talking to friends, they'll go, how's Aneesha? The kid's all right. Because again, we don't keep it from people. You know, we know Aneesha was in hospital at Easter. How's she getting on? And that makes it easier because I've got nothing to make up. I can just be honest and say, she's had a couple of bad days, but on the whole, you know, things are good. So yeah, be open, be honest.
How do you want your son to be like when he's grown up and he has a family?
Compassionate, which he is. Strong, which he is. Not differentiating the role of a man and a woman. I was really lucky the way I was brought up, in that I wasn't brought up in an environment where the expectation of a woman was that, and an expectation of a man is that. So, and again, it sounds like a cliche, but I'm just speaking honestly. Everyone's equal, everyone's on the level, and I hope that we've brought Jane up in a way that he sees that. From the fundamentals that me and Aneesha do as a couple, how we've chosen to live our married life. If Aneesha's in work and I'm working at home, I'll cook. If it's the other way round, she will. If she's got a late meeting, I'll take Amelia swimming. If it's the other way round, Aneesha will do it. It's kind of that
Partnership.
Equality and partnership. And like I said earlier, I think you get much further if you're doing things together. I've learned that to my detriment with some things that have happened in my past about trying to, be strong and do it all yourself. You find that when you bring other people in, the load is halved, the load is shared, and you've got more energy to focus on other things then as well, rather than let things consume you. I hope Jane, as well as a man, sees how strong his mum's been, because Aneesha is one of the strongest people I've ever met. Like literally, like I see the pain, I know what it does to her, and she doesn't let it define her.
Yeah.
It's part of who she is.
Yeah.
But it isn't all of what she is.
Yes.
And so for Jane, if he can know that, things might not always be perfect, but define your own destiny. Don't let what you have define you, and be brave enough to be who you are.
Yeah. And for your daughter? What is your hope for your daughter? What are your wishes for your daughter? So
for Amelia, I know it sounds an awful thing to say. I've seen Aneesha go through what she's gone through, and I know I have no control over it because the path is written. First and foremost, you pray that God hasn't put endometriosis in her future life. But if it does, then she's got no one better to help her navigate her way through that, and to know that things will be okay. I hope, similar to Jane, that she is strong enough to go and be exactly who she wants to be. There's no constraints on her or him. Go and do what you want to do. If we were talking earlier before we came on about, school and exams and all the rest of it, fundamentally they're really important, of course they are, but they don't define you as a person. You might have those grades behind you, but you, by your actions and how you go out there into the world, define who you are. You're not defined by a piece of paper. Or do whatever makes you happy, because look, in all seriousness, nothing's promised to any of us. You never know what's coming around the corner.
Even tomorrow is not promised to anyone.
It's not. So fundamentally, for both of my children, be happy, be grateful for what you have, but go into every situation happy and humble, and the rest will take care of itself. So that's what I'd say to both of my kids.
Wonderful thoughts. Aneesha, this partnership that you've had, how many years have you been married now?
Been married for
16 and a bit now.
16 and a bit. We've been together for 22 years.
What have you learned from Ben?
I think it's more what you've learned from me.
Oh
isn't
yeah,
it?
always be humble.
There is lots. We spoke about resilient. You are so resilient. He's, you asked the question about our children and who they'll become. Jayan won't have a problem because he's watched his dad. He's had a role model like his dad, and I see things that he does, that caring, compassion. Like I said, when I'm not well, he's a teenage boy, so, but when it matters, honestly, it's like you stood right there. I couldn't get through half I did. There's lots of women that have my condition that don't even have anything, and they have to do it all by themselves. Ben does everything. If I know I'm having a flare up or pain, I feel safe enough to tell Ben. I feel safe to say, do you know what, I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable, because I know he'll pick everything up just like that. He'll never complain, he'll never moan, he'll never say, oh God, can't you just do that, or how bad is it exactly? So you could just do that, or again, or nothing. And that's a big part of it, to feel safe enough to say, I'm having a flare up right now. We do talk a lot, we do communicate, and you have to have trust there. I know that he will be able to pick up everything with the children. That he will be able to, even when I was in hospital, this sounds really bizarre, I could just be in hospital.
Yes.
I wasn't worried, thinking, oh my God, you know, I need to get back home because the kids aren't going to be okay. Ben was with them. My mum and dad were having them. I knew they were okay. I knew that Ben would feed them or clothe them, you know, all of those things. I know they're the basics. I just didn't have to worry. I could just be. And, you know, that's a big thing.
How do you see, both the question is to both of you, how do you see your marriage has changed over the years? Especially because of endometriosis and everything with it that comes with it.
I think we were a lot closer.
Agreed.
I think we're a lot more open. You just say it how it is. Which I think lots of marriages that you've been together for a while. But no, I think we talk a lot more, a bit open about how we feel, how it's impacting us both. I think we've got a lot more empathy for each other and for others. That's another thing. I think we as a partnership have a lot more understanding for other people because of the space that we create for each other to be open and honest. We can then go out and create that space for others by being open. And I know I've used the word grateful a lot, but I am genuinely in that part of my life where I'm very grateful for so many things. This condition has probably only made us stronger, if anything. It can tear people apart. You know, it is difficult. It's probably brought us closer, essentially.
I think so. I think I agree with all of what you've said, and I think fundamentally, and God will test us in many different ways, but it's made me feel that to get to where we've got to, sat here today, as a partnership, we can deal with anything, literally. I'm not wishing anything, you know, to come to us, but I know, you know, when I put my head on the pillow tonight, I know if Aneesha's there tomorrow, we're okay. And whatever's going to come down the track will come. We're not perfect. And I think that's a strength of ours. We never pretend to be anything that we're not. We're honest with each other. We're open and upfront. If we need to speak sternly to each other, we will. If we need to be compassionate, I feel we read each other and we know. I think getting older, for me, a lot of our early marriage was about trying to keep people happy all the time, but together. What can I do to make Aneesha happy? Whereas now it's more about Aneesha might need some space if she's had a bad flare-up. She might want to go and listen to some music or read a book for 40 minutes. So I'm not even going to ask her what I can do. What I can do is be quiet and let her go and get on with it. And I'll go and do something. And I think that's been quite a big change for me, but a really positive one. To just know that I don't have to influence things all the time. Like if Aneesha needs space to deal, whether that's with a friend, a family member, by herself, or sat in the garden for an hour with a book, but that knowing when that happens, you don't have to speak about it. You sense it.
So Ben, before we end, I just have one last question for you. You know, you said that you grew up in an environment where everything was, you know, equal partnership. There's no one work that is only suited for one gender and the other is not, etc. But do you think you have become more aware of the needs of women around you, and that maybe in the workplace or in the community, in society, because of the condition Aneesha has? How do you support the women around you at workplace or in society?
I think I'm much more conscious within my friendship group, and especially at work as well, how women's health issues have such an impact on women. I think it's a really sort of old way of looking at it now that, oh well, when it's a woman's time of the month, you've just got to let them get on with it. And no, it's much more than that. I've noticed when I've spoken to female colleagues and friends about Aneesha's, in a few cases, they've actually opened up to me about what they're going through or have been through from a women's anatomy, from a physical perspective as well. And I feel really fortunate that they're able to do that because, as we've already heard, women don't necessarily talk to women enough about what they're experiencing and going through. So for a woman or women to approach me when we're having a conversation about Aneesha, and sorry, I do bring you up in conversations at work, I feel really grateful that they're able to feel in a comfortable enough space to raise those issues with me. And I think from a professional perspective, whether it's a man or a woman, you get more out of people by treating them with kindness and compassion. I've had people in my team, but I will proactively say to them now, if I know they're dealing with a condition, if you need to leave early, just update your diary. You don't need to tell me, just go and do what you need to do. And it might be a tricky week, 2 weeks, few months, but after that, it's almost like it's invigorated them because you've given that space to feel that it's not a problem, and it shouldn't be a problem. Like, these are conditions that women live with every day.
Yeah.
And so why should it be shied away from? That's not going to solve anything. It might be difficult for some people, but by being open and honest and having a real conversation about things, I just think it opens up a whole different world of opportunity, and for people to feel comfortable is just so important, whether you're male or female. But we're here today talking about a condition that affects females, and I think it just needs to be spoken about more. And if men need to be brave enough to do that, then they should, because what's the worst that's going to happen if you talk about it?
Wow, what a powerful sentence.
What's the worst?
What is the worst that's going to happen if you just talk about it? Wonderful. I think we couldn't have ended on a better note, but let's try and make it a little bit even better. So before we end, I do ask all my guests to end on a nice, positive note. So any message you would like to leave for me, the world, your children, each other, you can have just one, if you just don't mind putting it down here, and then I put it on the board behind me, and one day when my board is full, and I really hope it will be.
Won't be long.
I hope so, then I'm going to publish all of these.
Fantastic.
So Aneesha, do you want to read what you've written down?
Yeah, sure. So I put, share your stories because you don't know what others will feel safe enough to share with you. Let's create a compassionate and loving world.
And Ben, what did you write?
Life is better lived with people around you. Speak to everyone, embrace everyone, learn from everyone. Be grateful always, and God will take care of the rest.
Thank you so much. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for coming here, being so open and honest, and sharing your daily lived experiences. I hope our people who are listening to us today take something from it. One of the biggest things that I have taken away, amongst many and many small things as well, is what is the worst that can happen if you just talk about it. So thank you so very much. I really do appreciate it, and all the best for the future to both of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Knowledge is power, and every conversation brings us one step closer to better awareness, earlier diagnosis, and improved care for those living with endometriosis. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and please leave a comment. If you wish to take part, please scan the QR code on the screen. Until next time, stay unbroken.